Lots of people mentioned on Instagram that they have sourdough starters in their house, which is awesome. So today we're going to make a roasted tomato and garlic sourdough bread, which should be super delicious. This one does take a long time, started the day before. So the first thing you want to do is get any weird chunks of tomatoes you have, any tomatoes you don't want to eat that are kind of wrinkly and gross. Toss them in a pan with a few cloves of garlic, drizzle of oil, salt, pepper, and then we're going to pop it in the oven and roast them till they shrink up and look nice and caramelized, probably about half an hour. Now for our starter, I've got a sourdough starter here. Mine's just made with white flour, regular flour, and I fed it this morning, so it was around this green mark, and now it's doubled, well, a little more than doubled, so that means it's good to bake with. You can also test it if you want. It's called the float test. Just fill a glass with some water and put a little piece of your starter in, and it should float to the top here. Oh, it's spinning around now. That's also a good sign that it's working. So I'm gonna measure that one out, and then we'll mix it all together. Our tomatoes are all roasted here. So there was about 1 cup of tomatoes in there and 3 cloves of garlic. So I'm just gonna scrape it into my food processor and puree it till it's smooth. You can also just skip this step, add in about 2 tablespoons of tomato paste, maybe a little garlic, dried garlic or a clove of garlic chopped up, that'll work too. So our tomatoes are all pureed. It's surprising how small it looks now. And I'm just gonna pour that into my measuring cup. And then we want to add a little bit of room temperature warm water until we reach 1 1/3 of a cup. So it doesn't matter too much how much tomatoes you end up with at this point, because we're just gonna top it up with the water to get the right amount we need of liquid. So I'm gonna fill that up till it's at 1 1/3 of a cup. So now for the sourdough bread, we just mix everything together. We don't need to worry about kneading it because the sourdough starter, as it sits there, it's building up gluten, and then we're gonna slowly fold it over a few hours. That's also gonna help instead of doing the kneading process we normally do. So I've got the 1 1/3 a cup of warm water mixed with the tomato puree we had earlier. And then I've got about 1/2 cup of my sourdough starter. It's about 100 grams as well if you're weighing things. Just toss that in there. And sourdough starter adds a lot of flavor, but it also has a natural yeast in it, and that's what's gonna give us the rise instead of adding instant yeast. Then to this, I'm gonna add 1 teaspoon of dried basil because it's gonna be like a tomato basil bread. We also have 2 1/3 a cup of flour, so I'll toss that in there. And then we just wanna stir this until it's all combined. It's gonna be a little bit gloopy looking, but we wanna make sure there's no chunks of flour or like little flour balls in there. And if you have a container that has a lid, that's ideal, because we're gonna need to come back to this a few times. I'm just gonna stir this up, we'll be right back. Perfect, so this is a nice pretty pink color right now from the tomatoes. This is all we're gonna do for now. We're gonna cover it, leave it at room temperature for 1 hour, and then we'll add our salt to it. Our dough has rested for 1 hour, so that's what it looks like. And now we're gonna add in the salt. And this is because the salt actually kind of stops some of the yeast from growing, and we just want to give it a head start. So now we're going to add 1 1/2 teaspoons of salt and just sprinkle it on top. And then we're going to kind of poke it in with our fingers just to mix the salt in there. Nothing too crazy. And then we're going to fold 4 sides of it. So I'm gonna start at the top and fold it over, turn, do the same thing again, turn, lift it up and fold, and last side. It's gonna have this sticky dough ball now in the middle, and then we're gonna leave it for 1/2 hour. We're gonna do that again, and then we're gonna do that again, and we're gonna do it 5 times or 6 times if you want. So what I like to do is I put a little sticky note on top, I say whenever I do a fold, I just mark it on here until I get to 5, and then we'll let it rest. It's been 30 minutes, so we're gonna do our 4 folds again. So again, up and over, turn 90 degrees, up and over, 90 degrees, up and over, 90 degrees, up and over. Looks like that, and then another 30 minutes, and just keep repeating until we've done it 5 times. So this is number 2, 2 check marks, and now we wait. Awesome, so we're on our 5th and last fold. You can do a 6th one if you feel like it, but I don't. So we're gonna do our fold here, and you'll notice now that the dough will feel a lot firmer. It'll be kind of holding a bit more into a ball shape. And that's because we've built up all this gluten while folding it instead of kneading it. So that's awesome. So this is what my dough looks like. I'm gonna put the lid on. I'm gonna let it sit at room temperature for about 1 hour, and then I'm gonna pop it in the fridge overnight or for about 12 hours. The sun is shining, it's a beautiful day. Our dough rested overnight, so this is what it looks like. We're just gonna let it sit at room temperature for 2 hours about. We just wanna bring it up to room temperature, let it relax, and then we'll shape it. Our dough has come up to room temperature and relaxed, so we're gonna shape it right away. But once you shape it, you're gonna need to put it into a container. So my pot I'm gonna bake it in is an oval. So I've got this Easter basket that's also an oval. I cut the handles off. If you've got a round one, you can just use a bowl. Whatever shape you're using, try to find something similar to the size of your pot. And then in that, I've got a tea towel, and I heavily dusted it with flour. So we're just gonna tuck that into our basket. And then once our bread's ready, we'll pop it in. So I got our dough put out on a floured surface. I'm gonna lightly flour the top. And then we wanna kind of press it out just lightly. And then we're gonna fold it into thirds, like a letter, and then just roll it up. And then you can pinch this edge here together all the way, and then put it with the seam side facing the top into your little bread basket. I'm just gonna cover the top, and then you can put this in the fridge for 3 to 4 hours, or leave it out on your counter for 1 hour. Once your bread is almost ready to go in the oven, you want to heat your oven up to 450 degrees with your pot inside, and then you'll also need a piece of parchment that's going to fit into the bottom of your pot. Our bread has sat for about 3 hours in the fridge, so we're just going to flip it onto our parchment that fits into the bottom of our pot. Peel away that. Nice little shape. We're gonna give it a little extra dusting of flour. This is gonna help make our design pop out. And then I have an X-Acto blade, or you can use a really sharp knife, and we're gonna score our bread. And this is just gonna help it expand nicely in the oven. You can do all sorts of little patterns on there. Perfect. Now to grab our pot. So our pot was heated up in the oven to 450. We're gonna drop our little bread ball in there, and then put 1 ice cube underneath the parchment, and then quickly close the lid, put it in the oven for 45 minutes, take the lid off for 10 more minutes. It's been 45 minutes, so lid off, back in the oven for 10 minutes. How gorgeous is this beautiful loaf? It still kept some of that tomatoey color. It's a little warm, so I'm gonna cool it on a wire rack and then chop it open. But thanks so much for joining me, and I can't wait to see all your